Hi guys, I'm Deirdre, and I'm going to show you how you can use Personal Community to automatically send personalized notifications to patients. And these are new features that just came out in our brand new release, 2018.1. So before we jump in, I just want to see a show of hands. How many people have already worked with our Personal Community product? Okay, a couple. And how many are planning on implementing it? There's some maybes. Okay, so if I reference anything that you're not familiar with, since we have a lot of people that are new to the application, just please stop me and raise your hand and ask a question. And in general, it's fine to ask questions as I go along, and you don't have to wait until the end. Okay. So to kind of illustrate the problem that we're trying to solve, I'm going to tell you a story. There's two people, Sarah and Maria, and they don't know each other, but on the same day, they both have the same crisis happen to them. They have severe pain in their side and nausea. So they both go to the ER, and the doctors tell them exactly the same thing, and they're both told they have kidney stone. It's a small one. They just have to go home and wait it out, let it pass through the system. They're given medication prescriptions, and they're told to make a follow-up appointment with a urologist. Okay. So now they go home, and here's where their stories get a little bit different. So let's see what happens to them when they're at home trying to manage their own care with this condition. And note that they both are active registered users on our Personal Community product. So these are the problems that both of them face. They ran in, by strange coincidence, exactly the same problems. They both lost the discharge instructions that they were given at the ER. They both didn't really get what was going to happen. They felt a lot of uncertainty and fear, and they didn't understand the mechanics of what was happening. They both made a little mistake with the medications, so their pain was continuing. And both of them did make that follow-up appointment, but then they got distracted and they forgot when it was. So let's start with Sarah. Now, Sarah happened to remember about her Personal Community logon, so she signed on to the app, and she was actually able to work around several of these problems. So first of all, she viewed the documents in Personal Community, and she found those instructions. She was able to read them. She went into the Personal Community library, and she read some good articles describing the condition, and that kind of assuaged her anxiety about what was going to happen. She happened to see those medication orders, and she realized, oh, gosh, I'm taking this wrong. She got on track, and the pain started decreasing. And finally, she was able to message her urologist and straighten out the confusion about when that appointment actually was. So we come to Sarah, and she actually, let's say that her health was fantastic and she never had a reason to log on to Personal Community. So she actually forgot that she had an account and forgot that it existed. So she was kind of a little more on her own with these problems. So she just had to rely on her memory of what they told her in the ER when she was in severe pain. She didn't really have a solution for the second one. The third one, she tried to call, and she had a bad experience. She only got through to a receptionist. They told her they were paging a doctor, and she just never got a call back, even though she called repeatedly. So at this point, she's still in pain. You can see that things are starting to kind of escalate with her. So of course, she missed the appointment. And she actually ended up going back to the ER. So this kind of brings us to the central problem of this presentation. The patients like Sarah are doing okay. They already are kind of getting the most out of their health care. But how do we reach the patients like Maria? Because these are the ones that, in our population, we're not really getting through to them, and they're not really getting great care, and they need more from us in some way. So one solution is an automated outreach. So she definitely needs some kind of outreach, but we don't even need to involve a human being. We can still get benefit from some things that are automatically sent from the system. Okay. And I kind of broke it down into two different buckets of solutions. And the first one is pretty simple. If there's something really important that we want patients to see, tell them when it's available on Personal Community. So Maria could have gotten a text that said, you have new data available with a link, and that would jog her memory to say, oh yeah, there's that Personal Community thing. She would have logged on, and that would have solved one of her problems right away. She would have found those discharge instructions. So a second, more kind of general category is sending personalized info to people based on events that are happening in their care. So one example of an event is the discharge. So when a patient is discharged from the ER, the system knows what their diagnosis is. We could set it up to send out a nice little PDF with educational material. So Maria could have just gotten an email with maybe a link and some material about kidney stones, and maybe that would have helped her with the anxiety and the confusion she felt. So since we have a room with a lot of solution developers in it, can anyone suggest any other solutions of this type that would have helped Maria for some of her other issues? Any takers? Something based on an event, like a triggering event. And fantastic. Appointment reminder is excellent. If she just got an email or a text the day before that appointment, that would have cleared that up right away. So I'm going to describe another solution, which is actually the one I'm going to demo in this category, which is, remember that she tried to call and she had a really bad experience. They didn't call her back. So we could also send patient satisfaction surveys upon discharge. That would give her a chance to report the problem. And if a lot of people are reporting it, it gives the organization a chance to say, okay, there's something we need to fix here with our workflow. Okay. So all of these things can be done in the new version. And let me go back a second. So the rest of our time here is kind of in two big chunks. So first, I'm going to just talk you through exactly what the product changes are in 2018.1 that you can use for this. It's going to be like a conceptual overview. And then I'm going to do a little demo of two different scenarios. Okay. All right, so now the product features. And before I jump in, since not everyone is familiar with the product, I want to explain some of the lingo that you'll hear from me. First thing you need to know is that Personal Community consists of two separate web applications, Public and Workbench. And Public is the one that the patients log on to, where they can view their own health data. This is a screenshot from the app. They can send messages to providers. And they can do a lot of other things, but those are the two that will be relevant to this presentation. The Workbench is the one that's used by administrators and staff, basically. So here's where you do a lot of the setup. And the provider end of the messaging is done in the Workbench. Okay. So any questions on Public versus Workbench before we go on? Okay. All right, and I'll also be using these terms a lot, and they have kind of a different nuance to each one. So what we refer to by a secure message is a message sent to the patient's inbox in Personal Community. And notifications are things like texts and emails. And finally, alert is kind of like all the above. It's the generic term I'll be using to describe any kind of digital communication sent to a patient from our system. That's it with the vocab. All right, so the two major features I'm going to show you are the Secure Message API and the ability to have these event-triggered alerts from information exchange. And let's start with the Secure Message API. Before I explain that diagram, before this new version, messaging patients out of the box, it was a manual process. Someone would have to log on to the Workbench and send a secure message to a specific person. You could trigger messages programmatically, but it required customization. So what we're introducing now is an API to do that. So when an external system needs to, on the fly, send any kind of communication out to a patient, whether it's a secure message or even something like a text or an email, we now have a SOAP API for that. And just to clarify what I mean by external system, because I know that's a little vague, it could be a true external system like an EHR or a payer, but it also could be something within HealthShare. It could be some code that you've wrote in your HealthShare system that's either in an ensemble component or a scheduled task. You can invoke the API from either place. So we're using SOAP instead of REST because of the additional security capabilities of SOAP. And I just want to emphasize that this isn't wide open for anyone in the world to kind of hijack and start sending things to your patients. In personal community, you control which systems are allowed to do this and then exactly what types of messages they can send. Okay. Also note that in personal community, we have this concept of a proxy, which is someone who is managing someone else's health so they can see their records and they can message on their behalf. And this API can send alerts to the patient, the proxy, or both, so you have that flexibility. And if you get a chance to go to the Experience Lab, you'll see a nice example with a proxy of this feature. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So another really cool feature, when you're sending secure messages, you can also send them an online form to fill out. And the forms are not a new feature in our product. We actually introduced that last year, but we're just making that part of our API. You could also just send regular attachments like PDFs, which an example would be the educational materials. You might want to have it as an attachment. So what if you send the exact same message to tons of people all the time? So you might want to have some pre-written text that you can reuse so that your sending system doesn't have to put the entire text of the message in each SOAP message that it sends to you. And we can handle that as well. We have the ability to create basically like form letters, like chunks of pre-written text in personal community. And each one of these kind of text letters will get some kind of ID, essentially. And then your source system just has to send the ID in the SOAP message. Community will fill it out, plug in the variables at runtime, and then send it off to the patient. And here we come to the thing that I personally think is actually the coolest part of this whole feature, which is that the pre-written text allows you to communicate with the patient in their preferred language. You can just note that Community does not translate any words for you or any text. You still have to do that translation, but you just drop it into your system, and the app will kind of pick the right language to send before it sends out the notification. So since my central theme was kind of reaching those unreachable patients, it kind of makes sense to use the language that they speak. So I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, and we have that just for your reference later. Okay, now we're on to the second feature. I know there's a couple people in the room that probably know what information exchange is. Can anyone tell me what clinical subscriptions are? Because that's a pre-existing feature in information exchange. Any takers? All right. This is a way for clinicians to sign up to receive alerts when certain events happen for patients of interest. So for example, a primary care doctor might want to know when all of her patients are admitted to the ER. She could get an alert when that happens. And this is a well-established feature of information exchange that's been out there for a while. Subscriptions there. I see a connection here. If only we could link them together with this new feature. And actually we can, and we did. And that's the second feature I want to tell you about, which is now we can use subscriptions. It's been expanded so that we can send alerts not just to clinicians, but also to patients through personal community. And you may be wondering, what kind of code do I have to write to implement this at my organization? And the answer is you don't have to write any. This is out of the box. You can set this up using configuration only. And we have actually some excellent documentation on this that just breaks it down step by step. So I highly recommend checking that out. I think it makes it very possible to set this up without using a developer. Okay. The only one more thing I want to mention on that topic is that if you're using these alerts based on subscriptions, you do need 2018.1 in information exchange and not just community. So you'd have to upgrade both. Okay, let me show you this in action. All right.
There's no capacity for patients to initiate a new background message.
They can log on to community, and they have an inbox where they can compose messages and pick which clinician they want to send it to.
They couldn't report the event like having taken the medication or having any adverse side effect.
I'm sorry, I should have repeated the first question. Let me back up a sec because I know it might be hard to hear. Your first question was, can patients initiate messages in the other direction? And I said you could do it from the inbox. And your second question is, can they talk about other things like I took a medication?
Could be structured in some way. They could have a form that wasn't sent originally, or maybe it's somehow sitting in their inbox that they can record events to feedback.
Yeah, we do have the forms feature has, you can post forms in personal community for patients to kind of pick and choose and fill out on the fly when needed. So that capability already exists, like even before 2018.1, they can do that. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Yeah. Okay, Sandra? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. So the question was, can these, like the new data alerts, can they observe restrictions, for example, when you don't want to tell a patient about their lab results for a certain number of days? And I think the answer is yes, and that would all be done in the clinical subscription side of things. So that's where I would look for how you want to configure that and set that up or determine those criteria. I don't think we have an out-of-the-box parameter that says wait X number of days, so you'd have to kind of engineer something. But it sounds like something that's possible. Any other questions? All right. Okay. First demo, talking about lab results. So this example is obviously going to be triggered right away. There's no waiting period since it's just a very simple scenario. We're going to send a text and or email to the patient notifying them of the new data, depending on their preferences, because we allow them to choose which way they want to receive it. So, show you this. Okay. So Maria's getting some labs, and I'm going to input them via HL7. And this is coming into her edge, or our edge. And if all goes well, I should see a message come into my inbox. Let me go to Outlook. And here it is. So here's our text we decided to send. You have new data. This is all configurable, exactly what text you want here. She clicks on the link and logs in. Oops. And right there on the home page, you can see a link for her recent lab test results. And there they are. So let me show you a little bit of the configuration for this. So first thing, we have, this is one of those pre-written messages I talked to you about, so let me show you where that is. It's in our personal community content file where we set that up. And I really just wanted to show you this because I'm kind of making the case that you don't need developers. And you can see that even though this is HTML, it's pretty straightforward. And we actually provide a sample with the kit. So you have something you can just take and tweak if you want to just set something up pretty quickly. And this is also an example with a couple of those little variables that can be plugged in at runtime. All right.
Seems like it'd be a nice touch on the viewer that I clicked on the URL because I was notified by a new lab. It'd be nice if it took me right to that
Right to the labs.
after I logged in. The URL should have the context of what page you want to go to from the viewer, rather than take you to the home page and have you figure out another link.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of clicking and navigating. And
Yeah.
when I'm using the system, Epic point of view, it's very irritating.
Mm-hmm.
You get these notifications, and after a while, I just get kind of notification fatigue, and I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Too much trouble to log in, go clicking, hunting, and finding the new data, rather than just take you to the new data page.
So the question was, can't the link just take you right to the page where you need to go instead of to the home page? And you can put any URL that you want, I think, in there, and I just put the home page. So you may have some flexibility. Oh, Meredith. It's not going to work. Okay. All right, and just for the recording, in case that wasn't picked up, that was Meredith, our product manager, and she said it's not currently possible, but it's on her list for the future, being able to do that. Okay. So while we're in here, another little piece I want to show you, let me go up one folder level, is we were in the file for the English language, and this, if you wanted to have multiple languages, this is just how you'd set it up. You'd have different folders for each one. And here I have ES for Espanol. Okay. So now let me show you how that's attached on the information exchange side. And before we leave here, just remember that this content file was called New Labs, and it's part of the file name. That's kind of our convention. So let me log on to the registry and show you the subscriptions. Okay. So now we are out of personal community, we're in information exchange, and we're on the registry. And this is the policy. And one of the key things on the screen that you might want to remember is that the subject line is how we make the link with that community content. So here there's this direct that indicates that it's the email text and not a secure message. And this new labs directs it to the specific content file that we want to use for this message. And otherwise, it's very similar to what you may have already seen in connection with the clinical subscriptions. It's the same routine. Okay, and is that text big enough? Should I zoom in a little? Okay, no response. So you may be wondering, where is the API actually invoked? Since I had that big diagram with the plugging in, like where does the plug occur? And so let me show you that part. So the API is invoked from the access gateway, and I'm showing you the access gateway production. And we have an operation. This is a standard class. You don't have to write this. And this is what invokes the API. So unfortunately, the SOAP message doesn't appear in the ensemble trace anywhere, but you can capture it using a SOAP log. And I did that, so I have a sample message to show you. Let's see. In lab SOAP. So if anyone wants a copy of these SOAP messages afterwards, you can just ask me and I can send you an email with them. But I'll just highlight a few things in this. Remember that new labs was the name of our content. That's in there as the content key. And the patient identifier. So in this case, since it's coming from information exchange, we're using MPID. But of course, from external systems, you can use any other identifier that you want to use. Okay. Any questions so far on that scenario? Okay. Oh, I almost forgot. So my test patient wanted to get both text and email. And I also got a text on my phone here. And this is just a screenshot from a previous test, just to prove that the texts really are coming through. So that example was notifications. Remember, those are the email and text. But what about secure messaging? So that's the one I'm going to show you next. And before I proceed, I just wanted to give you our recommendations about that, because you should, in your design process, you should really think carefully about whether you want to use a secure message or a text or email. So we recommend that anything that might potentially contain sensitive information, you want to use the secure message instead. You don't want to put that out there in the world via text or email. Sure.
Ask a question about the notification. Do you have another mechanism other than email? Can I intercept that message transaction and say route it to a chat bot that's going to a chat line or WeChat or something like that?
I don't see why not, but it's not out of the box. It would require some coding.
There's some place in there where you can grab that message and say,
Maybe a better question for Meredith.
everybody's doing chat, they're using line. An email is sort of on its way out.
Interesting.
Most people, they're online all the time. Hospitals and healthcare providers creating chat sessions and custom chat to communicate. So it'd be nice to have, again, every chat provider has its own unique things, so that's pretty complicated to try to figure out how to do it. Some places you can predict and say, okay, now this message wants to go someplace. Is there a message router? And then within the patient profile, it would be nice to have some way to indicate what their preferred messaging provider is, whether it's email, chat, or some other mechanism. I don't know if you've done that very well.
Well, right now we do allow them to select, but we only have those two choices, the email and text. Yeah, so I think we're looking at customization to add those features at this point. And in case anyone didn't hear the question, it was, are there any other options, like if you wanted to send these notifications to a chat instead, how could it be intercepted and routed someplace else, which is not currently available?
I guess another general thing would be thinking about
Yeah.
you started to think about implementing the chat kind of metaphor of interaction more than, again, the interface strikes me as very old school, almost 20th century email, lists of things, versus, again, I'm seeing in the world where people are so comfortable with the chat metaphor that there's a list of messages that I can always see and it's refreshed. I'm not clicking on and opening some message. It's just there. It's
Yeah, that's really good feedback for us, and definitely speak to Meredith if you can grab her after the session, because we'd really love to hear more. Later after. Okay, thank you. Okay. So this example with the secure message is just going to be, we're going to send the post-discharge satisfaction survey to our patient so Maria can talk about how nobody called her back when she was in pain and she had this horrible experience. Let's see. And once again, I'm going to trigger this by an HL7 message. This time it's the discharge message. And one thing I wanted to say first. So even though this is a secure message going to the inbox, patients still get a notification saying, hey, you have a secure message. And that was a pre-existing feature that was already there. They always get that. Let's see if this came in. All right, here's my new email that just says, you have a new message. Log on. And click on the one new message. And if you scroll down, you can see the text of the message, which is blah, 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 your feedback is important to us, fill out the survey. And there's a link right here for the survey. And again, this is just a personal community form, which was a pre-existing feature, so I won't spend too much time in it. Okay. So for the setup for this, again, you use a HTML content file. It's this. And you may be asking, where in the HTML do I attach the form? And the answer is you don't. You do it in the Workbench. So secure messages actually have a second step. There's a little extra setup that you have to do in the Workbench in addition. So let me show you that. Let me go into the Workbench here. Setup and message templates. So here's my message template in the Workbench for my example. Remember that survey 01 because that's going to be what we enter in our subscription. And these things, the content key links you to that content file. And here's where you attach the form down at the very bottom. Okay, looks like you can have multiple forms too. Okay. It looks like for secure messages, it's one or the other. Is that right, Meredith? Okay. All right, thank you.
When I log in as a member and I happen to be a proxy for several different people, how does that appear? Do the messages appear in my inbox and then I see that they're for the people for whom I'm a proxy?
I don't have an example to pull up right now. Maybe Meredith can explain. I also just wanted to show you that when you're setting up the text, you can have actually different text in the message for patients and proxies. And just here's an example of how to have a different copy of the file. And hopefully to recap some of the question for anybody who missed it, it was first, when you log on to Community and you're a proxy for one or more people, how does that appear? And it's not all intermingled. You have to switch contacts and you look at one at a time. Yeah, and the other, let me know if this is right. Your second half of the question was, if you're getting a notification, is it kind of confusing whether it's for you or which proxy? And we were saying that you can indicate which proxy in the text of the message.
I think it indicates which proxy it is when you log in.
Then there's a little more clicking, yeah. Right, yeah, exactly. Okay, no more questions. Let's go to the registry and let me quickly show you that subscription. And I think we have just enough time. So here's our subscription for the survey. And again, here's the subject line is where you make that attachment saying it's a secure message, and that's survey 01, which maps to your ID that was you entered in the Workbench. Okay. All right. So I know that realistically you will only remember 1% of everything I said. So let's do a recap and just make sure that your 1% includes some of the kind of important things. So this is, I would appreciate your participation. What version is this all in? 18.1, yes, okay. Clicker. Okay, there's 3 different ways we can communicate with patients. Chat is not one of them yet. What are the other 2 ways? Yep. SMS text, secure message. True or false? This new feature lets them correct their own medical record data when it's wrong. Okay, uh-oh, there's silence. Was anybody listening? The answer is false. Does it let you send online forms? Yes. Okay, what existing feature and information exchange are we hooking into to send alerts? Subscriptions. And true or false, you have to create a new ensemble operation to do this. False, it's out of the box. All right, thank you very much. Any more questions about personal community? Meredith is right in the back row in the black.